The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space. Inside, representatives from 847 different species sat in their designated seats, waiting for the final vote on Resolution 4429X. The resolution was simple. Place the primitive species called humans under Protective Custody Protocol 7. This meant Earth would become a protected world, watched from a distance until its inhabitants grew wise enough to join galactic society. Counselor Zixthara of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the speaking platform. His 4 arms gestured gracefully as he addressed the assembly. His translator device converted his musical tones into words that every species could understand. Fellow beings of the galaxy, Zixthara began, we have studied the humans for over 200 of their years. They are violent, unpredictable, and dangerous to themselves and others. Their own planet bears the scars of countless wars. They poison their air and water while fighting over resources. They create weapons capable of destroying their entire world. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The crystalline beings of the hegemony chimed their approval, their bodies glowing brighter. The floating energy forms of the ethereal collective pulsed in synchronized patterns that meant consensus. However, Zixthara continued, they also show promise. They are creative problem solvers, they care for their weak and injured, they create beautiful art and music, they explore and learn with great passion. This is why we propose protection, not destruction. The vote proceeded as expected. Species after species cast their decision into the quantum ballot system. The result was overwhelming. 723 votes for protection, 89 against, and 35 abstentions. Earth would be quarantined for its own good and the safety of the galaxy. Zixthara was about to announce the official result when every warning system in the chamber activated at once. Red lights flashed, alarms blared in frequencies that hurt sensitive ears. The massive viewing screen at the front of the chamber flickered to life, showing the space around the station. What they saw made no sense. Ships were appearing out of nowhere. Not just 1 or 2, but dozens of them. They materialized in bright flashes of light that should have been impossible. The ships were crude-looking compared to the sleek vessels of advanced civilizations. They appeared to be made of metal and ceramic, with strange markings on their hulls. Impossible, whispered Counselor Vexathala, the ancient historian whose species had kept galactic records for 50,000 years. The humans cannot leave their solar system. Our calculations show they need at least 200 more years to develop faster than light travel. The largest human ship moved closer to the station. A communication request appeared on the main screen. After a moment of stunned silence, Zixthara accepted the transmission. A face appeared on the screen. It was clearly human. 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, pale skin, and short brown hair. The creature wore what appeared to be a formal uniform of some kind. "Greetings," the human said in clear, unaccented galactic standard. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen of the United Earth Federation. We received your transmission about our primitive and dangerous nature. We thought we should attend this meeting about our future." The chamber erupted in chaos. 847 different species began talking, chirping, buzzing, humming, and telepathically screaming at once. Some delegates fainted. Others began praying to their various gods. The representatives from the Hive Mind Collective started arguing with themselves. Zixthara struck his ceremonial gong repeatedly, trying to restore order. "Silence! Silence in the chamber!" His translator was working overtime, broadcasting his words in every known language and communication method. When quiet finally returned, Ambassador Chen was still waiting patiently on the screen. "May we come aboard?" she asked politely. "We've brought some of our best diplomats and scientists. We're very interested in meeting you all." "This is impossible," Zixthara stammered. You should not be here. You cannot be here. Our models clearly show—" "Your models?" Chen interrupted gently. "Oh, you mean the study done by the observation post in the asteroid belt beyond Mars? We found that station about 5 years ago. We've been leaving information for your researchers to find. We thought you might want to know we were making progress." The crystalline hegemony's representative shattered one of its thinking crystals in shock. The sound rang through the chamber like a broken bell. "You knew we were watching?" "Of course," Chen replied. "We've known about galactic civilization for decades. We've been monitoring your communications and learning your languages. Did you really think a species that could split atoms and travel to other planets wouldn't notice spaceships watching them?" Counselor Chindar of the Trade Federation leaned forward, his insectoid features clicking nervously. "If you knew about us, why did you not make contact sooner?" Chen smiled, an expression that many species found unsettling due to the display of teeth. "We weren't ready yet. We needed time to prepare, to unite our world and develop the technology to meet you as equals, not as primitives begging for help." "But the technology," Vexthala insisted. "Faster-than-light travel requires specific scientific breakthroughs. We have detailed models of technological development. Every species follows the same basic path." "That's where you made your mistake," Chen said. "You assumed we would follow the same path as everyone else. But humans don't really like following rules. Even the rules of physics get negotiated sometimes." More ships continued to appear around the station. The displays showed at least 40 vessels now, each one different from the others. Some looked like they had been built from spare parts. Others appeared to be converted cargo haulers or passenger ships. "How many ships do you have?" Zixthera asked weakly. "Oh, these aren't all warships," Chen assured him. "Most of these are scientists, artists, teachers, and explorers. We brought our best and brightest to meet you. We also brought some very good coffee and chocolate. We understand those are rare in this part of the galaxy." The mention of chocolate caused another stir. Chocolate was indeed rare and highly prized among the few species that could safely consume it. The fact that humans were offering it as a diplomatic gift showed they had done their research. "We demand an explanation," Zixthera said, trying to regain some authority. "How did you develop faster-than-light travel?" Chen turned to someone off-screen and spoke briefly. Then she looked back at the camera. "Dr. Marcus Webb will explain." He led the breakthrough team. A new human appeared on screen. This one was older, with gray hair and kind eyes behind small, metal-framed glasses. "Hello, everyone," Dr. Webb said cheerfully. "The answer is quite simple, really. We didn't try to follow your technological progression because we didn't know it existed. We just solved the problems in front of us using human methods." "What methods?" demanded the ethereal collective's spokesperson, their energy form flickering. "With agitation. Trial and error, mostly," Webb admitted. "Lots of failure, some lucky guesses, and a few brilliant insights from people who thought differently than everyone else. We also borrowed some ideas from our science fiction stories." The chamber fell silent. The idea that a species could achieve faster-than-light travel by borrowing ideas from fictional stories was so absurd that no one knew how to respond. Ambassador Chen reappeared on screen. "We'd very much like to dock and meet you all properly. We have gifts to share and much to learn from you. We hope we can be friends." As she spoke, the viewing screen showed more human ships continuing to arrive, each one a testament to humanity's refusal to follow the rules that governed the rest of the galaxy. The emergency session convened 3 hours after the humans had docked their ships to the Galactic Council station. Counselor Zixthera sat at the head of the emergency committee, his 4 arms trembling slightly as he reviewed the preliminary reports. Around the curved table sat the most senior representatives from the major galactic powers, all trying to understand what had just happened to their carefully ordered universe. "The initial scans of their vessels are troubling," reported Chief Analyst Morden a tall, thin being with gray skin and large black eyes. Their technology should not work. We have identified at least 17 different faster-than-light drive systems among their 43 ships, and none of them follow established scientific principles. Dr. Webb sat across from the analysts, apparently relaxed despite being surrounded by some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Ambassador Chen had remained with the main human delegation, meeting with other council members. The human scientist had volunteered to answer technical questions, though his answers were proving more confusing than helpful. Dr. Webb, Zixthera began carefully, our scientists have studied faster-than-light travel for thousands of years. We know there are only 3 viable methods: hyperspace jumping, dimensional folding, and quantum tunneling. Yet your ships appear to use none of these. Webb nodded enthusiastically. That's right. We found those methods too complicated and expensive, so we developed alternatives. Alternatives? The word came out as a strangled sound from Counselor Vex Thala. There are no alternatives. The laws of physics are more like guidelines, really, Webb interrupted gently. At least that's what we discovered. Take our flagship, the Why Not. It uses what we call the improbability drive. Mordune's scanning device beeped frantically. Explain this improbability drive. Well, Webb said, scratching his head, it works on the principle that in an infinite universe, anything that can happen will happen somewhere. So we just convince the universe that we're already where we want to be. The ship doesn't actually move faster than light. It just politely asks reality to relocate us. The silence that followed was so complete that the station's air recycling system seemed loud in comparison. Several counselors looked at their universal translators, wondering if the devices had malfunctioned. That is impossible, stated Christarch Prime, the leader of the crystalline hegemony. Their body flashed angry, red patterns. You cannot negotiate with reality. Why not? Webb asked genuinely. We negotiate with everything else. We've found that if you're polite and persistent, most things will cooperate eventually, even quantum mechanics. A junior analyst rushed into the chamber, nearly colliding with a floating member of the ethereal collective. Urgent report, the analyst gasped. The human ship called Hold My Beer just demonstrated their drive system. They convinced a small asteroid that it was actually a flower and it bloomed. Webb brightened. Oh, that would be Captain Rodriguez and the Persuasion engine. Very creative approach. The theory is that everything in the universe wants to be something else, so we just help it along. Counselor Chindar's mandibles clicked nervously. But this violates causality, conservation of mass, and at least 47 other fundamental laws. Does it, though? Webb asked. Or does it just follow different rules? Human physics has always been a bit flexible. We discovered early on that if you believe something strongly enough and you have the math to back it up, the universe tends to go along with it. Show us the math, demanded Mordun. Webb pulled out a small device and projected a holographic equation into the air. The formula was unlike anything the galactic scientists had ever seen. It incorporated standard physics, but also included variables for hope, determination, and what appeared to be coffee consumption levels. This is not mathematics, Christarch Prime declared. This is poetry with numbers. Is there a difference? Webb asked. We found that pure mathematics was too rigid for what we wanted to achieve. So we added some humanity to it. Some emotion, some intuition, some stubbornness. Math with feelings, you might say. Vexathala, who had been silent for several minutes, finally spoke in a whisper. In 50,000 years of galactic civilization, no species has ever achieved faster-than-light travel through optimism. Well, optimism and really good engineering, Webb corrected. Plus a lot of trial and error. We lost quite a few test pilots before we figured out how to make it safe. Though safe is a relative term when you're convincing space-time to be more cooperative. Another alarm sounded in the chamber. This time it was Mordoon's personal communicator. He listened to the incoming message, his face growing paler with each word. "What is it?" Zixthera demanded. "The human ship, Murphy's Law, just offered to fix our quantum plague problem," Mordon reported in a shaky voice. "They say they've developed a cure." The quantum plague had been ravaging the ethereal collective for over 3,000 years. It was a disease that attacked energy-based life forms, slowly draining their consciousness until they faded into nothing. The greatest minds in the galaxy had declared it incurable. "Impossible," whispered the ethereal representative, their energy form flickering with hope and fear. "We have tried everything." Webb looked up from his equations. "Oh, that's Captain Martinez and her crew. They specialize in impossible problems. Their ship's motto is challenge accepted. They heard about your plague from some of our diplomats and thought they'd take a look." "How can they cure something that has defied our greatest scientists?" Zixthara asked. "Same way we achieve faster-than-light travel," Webb explained. "We don't accept that something is impossible just because no one has done it before. We ask different questions. Instead of, how do we cure the quantum plague? We asked, what if the quantum plague isn't actually a disease?" "What do you mean?" The ethereal collective's representative leaned forward, their energy crackling with intensity. "Well, from what we observed, it looks more like a programming error. Your species are essentially living software, right? So maybe the plague is just a bug in your code, and humans are very good at debugging." The chamber erupted again, but this time the chaos was different. Instead of panic and confusion, there was desperate hope mixed with disbelief. The ethereal collective began communicating among themselves in rapid bursts of energy. Meanwhile, reports continued to stream in from around the station. Human crews were offering solutions to problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia. They suggested new trade routes that shouldn't work, but somehow did. They proposed diplomatic solutions to ancient conflicts using approaches that violated every rule of interstellar law. They offered to share technologies that existed only because humans refused to believe they couldn't exist. "This changes everything," Vexathala said quietly. "If they can do these things, if they can solve our oldest problems simply by approaching them differently, then maybe," Zixthera finished. "We were wrong about who needs to be protected from whom." Dr. Webb smiled and began gathering up his impossible equations. "Don't worry about it too much," he said kindly. "Humans have found that most problems look smaller once you admit you don't know everything. We're just happy to help." As he prepared to leave, Webb paused at the door. "Oh, and Ambassador Chen wanted me to tell you that we've prepared a small gift for the Council. It's waiting in the main reception hall." After he left, the emergency committee sat in stunned silence, each member trying to comprehend how their understanding of reality had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours. Outside the chamber, the humans continued their work, politely revolutionizing everything they touched simply by refusing to accept that improvement was impossible. Counselor Vexathala stood in the great archive, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing 50,000 years of galactic law, precedent, and procedure. Her 6 arms moved quickly through the data streams, searching for anything that might help the Council understand their current situation. As the galaxy's most respected legal historian, she had been tasked with finding a precedent for what to do when a species crashed their own intervention hearing. "Computer, search for any instance where a pre-contact species achieved faster-than-light travel before Council authorization," she commanded. "0 results found," the archive responded in its calm, mechanical voice. "Search for any case where a species under consideration for protective custody protocol appeared at their own hearing. 0 results found. Search for any precedent involving species that develop technology outside established scientific frameworks. 0 results found." Vexthala's species did not typically experience frustration, but she was beginning to understand why other beings found the emotion useful. In 5 decades of legal practice, she had never encountered a situation with absolutely no precedent. The humans had managed to create an entirely new category of legal crisis simply by existing. Meanwhile, in the main reception hall, Ambassador Chen stood before the gift the humans had prepared for the council. It was a simple metal plaque mounted on a pedestal with words written in Galactic Standard. To our new friends in the galaxy, thank you for watching over us while we grew up. Now let's explore the universe together. Humanity. Surrounding the plaque were examples of human art, music, and literature, all translated into formats that different species could appreciate. There were sculptures that changed shape when viewed from different angles, music that incorporated sounds beyond normal hearing ranges, and stories written in mathematical equations for species that thought in numbers rather than words. But the real gift was less obvious. Dr. Sarah Kim, a human xenobiologist, was demonstrating a breakthrough that had taken her team only 3 days to achieve. She stood before a group of scientists from the Squeaker Collective, a species barely 4 feet tall with large ears and fur-covered bodies that most of the galaxy considered cute, but not particularly intelligent. The problem, Dr. Kim explained, isn't that your people lack intelligence. It's that everyone else has been measuring intelligence wrong. The lead Squeaker scientist, whose name translated roughly to Bright Whisker, twitched his ears nervously. For centuries, the Squeakers had been treated as junior members of galactic society, given simple tasks and excluded from important decisions. What do you mean? Bright Whisker asked in his high-pitched voice. Dr. Kim smiled and activated a holographic display. Your brains process information differently than most species. Standard intelligence tests measure linear thinking, but your minds work in 3-dimensional patterns. Watch this. She presented a complex spatial puzzle that had stumped galactic mathematicians for years. Within minutes, Bright Whisker had solved it by thinking of the problem as a physical space he could navigate rather than an abstract mathematical challenge. Fascinating, whispered Dr. Talar, a tall, thin scientist from the prestigious Academy of Sciences. We never thought to test spatial reasoning in this way. That's because you were thinking like your own species, Dr. Kim explained. Humans have learned that intelligence comes in many forms. We've had to, since we have so many different ways of thinking among our own people. Word of the breakthrough spread quickly through the station. Within hours, human scientists were working with researchers from dozens of species that had been overlooked or underestimated by the major galactic powers. The humans brought a fresh perspective to old problems, but more importantly, they brought respect for different ways of thinking. In the medical bay, Dr. James Okafor was working with the Ethereal Collective on their quantum plague problem. His approach was so simple that the energy beings had initially dismissed it as primitive thinking. You've been trying to cure the plague by attacking it directly, Dr. Okafor explained to the shimmering energy form of luminous thought, one of the collective's brightest minds. But what if instead of fighting it, we gave it something better to do? Explain, luminous thought pulsed, their energy signature curious but skeptical. The plague feeds on your energy, right? So it's hungry. What if we created an artificial energy source that was more attractive to it than your life force? Like setting up a better restaurant next door. It was such a human solution, redirecting a problem rather than confronting it directly, that the Ethereal Collective had never considered it. Within hours, they had constructed a prototype energy beacon that drew the plague away from infected individuals like a magnet. Back in the council chambers, emergency sessions were being called every few hours as more reports came in. The 3 major galactic powers, the Zephyrian Empire, the Crystalline Hegemony, and the Ethereal Collective, were struggling to maintain control as smaller species began to bypass traditional channels entirely. This is unacceptable, declared Zixathera during the 5th emergency session of the day. The humans are disrupting thousands of years of established order. They're helping people, countered Counselor Mintar of the Aquatic Federation, a mid-level, alliance that had never been invited to the major power meetings before. They've solved more problems in 2 days than we've addressed in 2 centuries. That's not the point. Christarch Prime's body flashed angry red patterns. There are procedures, protocols, proper channels for technological development and diplomatic contact. The humans didn't know about your channels, Mintar replied calmly. They created their own, and they work. The argument was interrupted by an aide rushing into the chamber with yet another report. Urgent news from Sector 7, the aide announced breathlessly. The human ship Problem Solver has made contact with the Hive Mind Collective. This caused immediate alarm. The Hive Mind Collective was considered one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Billions of insectoid creatures that shared a single consciousness. They had been quarantined in their home system for over 1,000 years after several violent first contact incidents. What happened? Zixthera demanded. Are the humans in danger? No, sir, the aide replied, checking his notes. The Hive Mind is requesting art lessons. The chamber fell silent. Then Counselor Kindar began making a sound that his translator identified as hysterical laughter. Art lessons? Vexathala repeated weakly. Yes, ma'am. Apparently the humans asked the hive mind what they wanted most in the universe. The answer was to create something beautiful that was uniquely theirs. The humans immediately offered to teach them pottery, painting, and music composition. The report continued with details that seemed to come from a fever dream. The hive mind, whose shared consciousness had always been seen as a threat, had created their first individual artwork, a massive sculpture made from their own molted exoskeletons that depicted the moment of first contact with humanity. They called it the day we learned we could be more. As the reports kept coming, a pattern emerged. The humans weren't just solving technical problems or offering new technologies. They were changing how species saw themselves and each other. They approached every interaction with the assumption that everyone had value and potential, regardless of their place in the established galactic hierarchy. They're not just disrupting our procedures, Vexathala said quietly. They're making them irrelevant. Zixthera looked around the chamber at the faces of representatives who had once looked to the major powers for leadership. Now those same faces were turning toward the humans with hope and excitement. What do we do? He asked, and for the first time in his long career, he genuinely didn't know the answer. Outside the chamber, Ambassador Chen was having coffee with a group of junior diplomats from various species, listening to their ideas and treating their suggestions with the same respect she would give to senior counselors. It was such a simple thing, but it was revolutionizing galactic politics one conversation at a time. 3 weeks after the humans had arrived at the Galactic Council Station, the traditional power structure of the galaxy was crumbling like a sandcastle in a hurricane. Ambassador Chen stood in what had once been called the Junior Species Assembly Hall, but was now packed with representatives from over 400 different civilizations. Many of them had never been invited to speak in the main council chambers before. The motion on the floor, Chen announced, is to establish the Galactic Cooperative, an alliance based on mutual aid, shared knowledge, and equal representation, regardless of technological level or military power. The vote was a formality. 387 species voted in favor, only 13 voted against, and those were mostly client states of the major powers who feared retaliation. In the main council chamber, Zixthara watched the proceedings on a monitor with growing horror. Around him sat the representatives of the 3 great powers and their few remaining allies, looking like survivors of a shipwreck. This is madness, Christarch Prime declared, their crystalline body pulsing with angry red light. These species cannot govern themselves. They lack the experience, the wisdom, the technological sophistication. The Squeakers just solved the energy distribution problem that's been plaguing Outer Rim colonies for decades, interrupted Counselor Mintar, who had officially joined the human-led alliance that morning. Yesterday, the tentacle folk figured out how to purify contaminated water using nothing but algae and good intentions. The humans taught them to think differently about molecular bonding. Impossible. Luminary of void from the ethereal collective. Flickered dismissively. These are primitive species with primitive solutions. That's what we said about the humans, Mintar pointed out. Right up until they started fixing everything we couldn't. The bitter truth was that the humans had indeed been fixing things. Not just technical problems, but social and political ones too. They had a talent for seeing potential where others saw only problems. Dr. Webb was currently in the Squeaker home system, helping them set up their first university. The Squeakers had always been intelligent, but their education system had been designed by the major powers to keep them in supporting roles. The humans had looked at the same data and seen brilliant minds being wasted. Captain Rodriguez was working with the Hive Mind Collective to develop new forms of art that incorporated their unique shared consciousness. What had once been seen as a terrifying alien way of thinking was now producing the most beautiful collaborative sculptures the galaxy had ever seen. Even more troubling for the establishment was what the humans called diplomatic innovation. Ambassador Chen had introduced the radical concept of actually asking species what they wanted instead of telling them what they needed. The results had been revolutionary. The Aquatic Federation had always been treated as a minor power because their worlds were mostly water, which the land-based major powers considered less valuable. The humans had pointed out that water worlds were perfect for certain types of manufacturing and research that required precise temperature control. Within days, the Aquatic Federation had become a major hub for advanced technology development. "We could stop this," Zixthara said quietly. "We still have superior military forces. We could enforce the old order." "With what justification?" asked Vexthala, who had been notably quiet during recent meetings. "The humans haven't broken any laws. They've simply made our laws irrelevant by showing everyone a better way." "They're dangerous," insisted Christarch Prime. "They're disrupting millions of years of stable galactic civilization." "Stable for whom?" Vexthala asked. "The major powers maintained stability by keeping everyone else dependent on us. The humans have shown these species that they don't need our permission to thrive." The conversation was interrupted by an aide who approached Zixthara with obvious nervousness. "Sir, we've received a formal invitation." "To what?" "The Galactic Cooperative is hosting their first General Assembly next week. They've invited all species to participate, including the major powers. Ambassador Chen specifically requested that you be given a place of honor as one of the founders of galactic civilization." Zixthara stared at the invitation, trying to process the implications. The humans were treating them with respect, even as they dismantled everything the Council had built. It was infuriatingly gracious. "They're mocking us," Christarch Prime flashed, angry colors. "No," Vexthala said slowly. "They're doing something much worse. They're forgiving us." Meanwhile, in the new Cooperative Assembly Hall, a remarkable scene was unfolding. The Squeakers were presenting their solution to the food shortage, problem that had affected several border worlds. Their proposal involved hydroponic systems designed specifically for low-gravity environments, something the major powers had declared impossible due to the engineering challenges. "How did you overcome the root stabilization problem?" asked Dr. Talar, who had been assigned to monitor the proceedings for the Academy of Sciences. Bright Whisker's ears twitched with what his species considered a smile. "We asked the plants what they wanted instead of telling them what we thought they needed. Turns out they prefer to grow in spirals when gravity is low. Makes them stronger." It was such a fundamentally different approach to problem solving that Dr. Talar found himself taking notes despite himself. The Academy had always approached botanical engineering as a mechanical problem. The Squeakers, guided by human thinking, had approached it as a conversation with living things. Dr. Kim was working with a group that would have been unthinkable just a month ago. Squeakers, members of the hive mind collective, representatives from the tentacle folk, and even a few energy beings from the ethereal collective. They were developing what they called biosymphonic architecture, buildings that were grown rather than constructed, designed to work in harmony with their environment rather than dominating it. The key insight, Dr. Kim explained to a fascinated audience, is that different species see different solutions because they interact with the world in different ways. When we combine all these perspectives, we get answers that none of us could reach alone. This collaborative approach was spreading throughout the cooperative. Species that had never spoken to each other were now working together on projects. That would have been impossible for any single civilization to achieve. The Aquatic Federation's precision manufacturing was being combined with the Squeaker's botanical engineering and the hive mind's collective problem-solving abilities to create technologies that seemed almost magical. Back in the old council chamber, reports of these achievements were creating an atmosphere of desperation among the remaining major powers. "We have to do something," Zixthera said. "If this continues, we'll become irrelevant." "We already are irrelevant," Vexthala replied sadly. "We just haven't admitted it yet." She pulled up a holographic display showing trade routes throughout the galaxy. "Look at the data. Over 60% of interstellar commerce is now flowing through cooperative channels. They're not excluding us, but they're not waiting for us either. They're simply building a better system around us." The display showed something even more troubling. The new trade routes were more efficient than the old ones. The humans had applied their problem-solving approach to galactic logistics, treating it as a puzzle to be solved rather than a system to be controlled. The result was a network that served everyone's needs better than the old council-regulated system had. "What do we do?" Christarch Prime asked, their usual arrogance replaced by something that might have been fear. Vexthala looked at her colleagues, these powerful beings who had ruled the galaxy for so long, and realized that there was only one option left. "We adapt," she said, "or we become a historical footnote in the story of the day the galaxy learned it didn't need us to tell it how to live." 6 months after the humans had crashed their own intervention hearing, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood once again before a galactic assembly. But this time, she stood as the elected speaker of the Galactic Cooperative, representing not just humanity, but 412 different species who had chosen to work together rather than submit to the rule of others. The old council chamber had been redesigned completely. Instead of the rigid hierarchy of elevated platforms for major powers and lower seats for lesser species, there was now a circular arrangement where every representative sat at the same level. The humans had suggested it, saying that democracy worked better when everyone could look each other in the eye. "The first order of business," Chen announced, "is the formal dissolution of the Protective Custody Protocol system. All species currently under galactic supervision will be offered full membership in the cooperative, with complete autonomy over their own affairs." The vote was unanimous among cooperative members. Even some former council loyalists had joined the new alliance, drawn by the promise of actually having a voice in galactic affairs rather than simply following orders from above. In the back of the chamber, in seats that were identical to everyone else's but somehow felt like exile, sat the former major powers. The Zephyrian Empire, the Crystalline Hegemony, and what remained of the Ethereal Collective had not officially joined the cooperative, but they had been invited to observe. It was a courtesy that many of them found more insulting than outright exclusion would have been. Zixthera watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. Part of him was horrified at the chaos the humans had unleashed. The galaxy had functioned smoothly under council rule for thousands of years. Now it seemed like everyone was trying to solve every problem at once, often in ways that violated established procedures and scientific principles. But he had to admit that it was working. The food shortages that had plagued Outer Rim colonies for decades were ending thanks to Squeaker agricultural innovations. The energy crisis that had threatened several systems had been solved by a joint project between the Aquatic Federation and reformed pirates who had been ignored by the old council. Even the ancient territorial disputes that had simmered for centuries were being resolved through human-style diplomacy that focused on finding solutions everyone could live with rather than determining who was right. The second item, Chen continued, is the establishment of the Galactic Problem-Solving Initiative. Any species, regardless of size or technological level, can submit challenges to the cooperative. We'll assign collaborative teams to work on solutions, with the understanding that the best ideas can come from anywhere. The first challenge came from an unexpected source. A small delegation of energy beings approached the speaking platform, their forms flickering with nervous energy. "We are the Forgotten Lights," their spokesperson announced. "We have observed galactic civilization for millennia from the spaces between stars, but we were deemed too weak to matter. We wish to contribute." Chen smiled and gestured for them to continue. "What can you offer?" "We know the patterns of dark matter and how it flows through the galaxy. We could help you build transportation networks that use these currents, making travel much faster and more efficient than current methods." The offer caused excited murmurs throughout the chamber. Dark matter had been a mystery to galactic science for thousands of years. The idea that there were beings who understood it naturally was revolutionary. Christarch Prime, despite their determination to maintain dignity, found themselves leaning forward with interest. The crystalline hegemony's entire economy was based on controlling transportation routes. If the Forgotten Lights could really map dark matter currents, we would be honored to learn from you, Chen replied. Dr. Webb's team has been working on dark matter theories. I'm sure they'd love to collaborate. It was that simple. No committees, no approval processes, no lengthy debates about whether the Forgotten Lights were qualified to participate in advanced research. The humans had established a system where good ideas were welcomed regardless of their source. Vex Thala, who had been documenting these proceedings for the historical record, paused in her note-taking. She realized she was witnessing the birth of something entirely new in galactic history. Not just a different government or alliance, but a completely different way of thinking about civilization itself. The humans had done something that seemed impossible. They had created a system based on trust rather than control. The old council had maintained order by carefully managing who could do what and when. Every innovation had to be approved. Every new idea vetted by committees of experts. Every change implemented slowly and cautiously. It had kept the galaxy stable, but it had also kept it stagnant. The cooperative worked on the opposite principle. They assumed that most beings wanted to help and contribute, and they created structures that made it easy to do so. Instead of preventing problems through restrictions, they solved problems through collaboration. The third item on our agenda, Chen announced, is a proposal from the Hive Mind Collective regarding the creation of a galactic art exchange program. What followed was a presentation that would have been impossible under the old system. The Hive Mind had created a proposal for sharing artistic techniques and cultural expressions across species boundaries. They wanted to learn new forms of beauty from every civilization and share their own unique aesthetic contributions. The proposal was approved by acclamation, with dozens of species volunteering to participate immediately. As the session continued, Zix Thara found himself thinking about the conversation he'd had with Ambassador Chen the week before. She had approached him privately, offering the Zephyrian Empire full membership in the cooperative with no conditions except a commitment to collaborative problem-solving. "We know you're proud of your achievements," she had said. "The Council brought peace and stability to the galaxy for thousands of years. That's not something to be ashamed of. But now it's time to try something new." "And if we refuse?" he had asked. Chen had shrugged, that uniquely human gesture that somehow conveyed both indifference and understanding. "Then you refuse. We're not going to force you. The invitation will remain open whenever you're ready." It was the complete opposite of how the Council had operated. When they had wanted compliance, they had used economic pressure, diplomatic isolation, or, in extreme cases, military force. The humans offered partnership and accepted refusal with equal grace. The session was winding down when Chen made an unexpected announcement. Before we adjourn, I want to address something important. The old Galactic Council is being dissolved today, but that doesn't mean its members are being cast aside. The Zephyrian Empire, the Crystalline Hegemony, and the Ethereal Collective built the foundation that made modern galactic civilization possible. We hope they'll help us build what comes next. She looked directly at the former major powers as she spoke. The invitation stands. You helped shepherd the galaxy through its childhood. Now help us guide it through its adolescence. For the first time in months, Zixathara felt something other than resentment toward the humans. They weren't trying to humiliate the old powers or erase their contributions. They were offering genuine partnership based on mutual respect. As the assembly dispersed, species after species approached the human delegation with new ideas, offers of collaboration, and expressions of gratitude. The energy in the chamber was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. It was the energy of beings who believed they could solve problems together that none of them could solve alone. Vexathala approached Chen as she gathered her materials. "Ambassador, may I ask you something?" "Of course. What will you do if this fails? If the cooperative becomes as rigid and controlling as the council eventually did?" Chen considered the question seriously. "Then I suppose someone else will have to show us a better way, just like we showed you. That's how progress works, isn't it? Every solution creates new problems, and every generation has to find new solutions." She smiled at the elderly historian. "The trick is to stay humble enough to admit when you're wrong and brave enough to try something different. Humans are pretty good at both." As Chen walked away to join the celebration that had erupted throughout the station, Vexathala began writing, the final entry in her record of the Galactic Council. "Today we learned that the most dangerous thing about humans was never their weapons or their technology. It was their stubborn insistence that everyone deserves a voice, and their absolute refusal to accept that improvement is impossible. Outside the chamber, humans and aliens worked together on projects that would have been unthinkable just months before, building a future none of them could have imagined alone. The Council had voted to control humanity, but in the end, humanity had freed the galaxy by teaching it to control itself.